When I was younger in middle school, my youth group, we participated in this sort of Christian arts competition every year. And we would go to what was known, there was be a regional sort of part of it, and then if you did well in that regional part, you'd go on to a national part, national competition. And we did this every year, and at middle school, I competed and I managed to actually make it to the national stage of that competition. So I went with my youth group and with all the other people who had made it. We were down in D.C. It was held at that convention center, and there was a day where where we were looking at like these screens that they had up that were showing all the people who had advanced kind of to the next round in that competition in their different categories. So I was looking through it, trying to find if my name was up there, if some of my friends' names were up there and stuff. Seeing how we were all doing and everything, and I was really engrossed by it all. And then I turned around, and the group was gone. So I had been left behind in the Washington, D.C. Convention Center. And this was before the age of cell phones, so I had no way of calling and contacting my mother or the youth pastor or anybody like that. Fortunately for me, one of the other pastors at our church was there as well. And I found him, and he was able to take me back to the hotel and everything where we were all staying. Well, needless to say, both my mother and the youth pastor were not thrilled with what had happened. They were very kind of frightened and upset. My mother was obviously worrying a ton. And my youth minister, I remember, gave me a very stern talking to about how I needed to kind of have my head on a swivel. And I think of that story whenever I read this passage in Luke where Jesus goes with his parents to the temple. He was about the same age as me, and he too got left behind. Now, there were major differences between our stories in some sort of ways. In Jesus' case, this was part of God's will for him to be in his, in what was God's house, his father's house. And in my case, it was more just that I kind of was not paying attention, and the youth pastor as well probably should have maybe have done a head count before he left and made sure that that he didn't leave anybody behind. But you can see how this type of stuff happens. And I know sometimes when we read this, we kind of wonder how in the world did Mary and Joseph leave their son behind. But it's you get caught up, you think they're with you, and then you're out a ways away and you look and you realize, oh no, they're not there. And that's what had happened with me. But there's a number of things in this story that I do think are kind of interesting besides that for us to take into account. And I think the big thing is that Jesus was left there for several days, but all indication seems to be that he was spending a lot of time in the temple during all of that. Now, we don't know how he survived, I'm assuming probably what happened is that one of the teachers there, one of the priests or teachers or whoever who was usually at the temple saw him, thought it was a little weird that he was left behind, and made sure he was taken care of until his parents returned. But you have this story of him talking and really like showing a surprising amount of knowledge to those who were there and everything, and also it showed a real desire of him to be in the presence of God, which is something that we ourselves should all strive to do. As Christians, as followers of Christ, we should be trying to emulate him in our lives. And this is a very early and admittingly somewhat childish example, but we should be trying to pursue in that sort of way. Now, not by making our parents pull our hair out in that sort of sense, which, as you can see, Mary and Joseph both were, but by seeking after God in that sort of way and letting him take care of us in that sort of sense. This is one of the few stories that we actually have of Jesus's childhood in Scripture. We don't really have anything that shows what he was like as a kid. And it's very possible that this story, as well as the story that precedes it, when Jesus was presented at the temple and you had some prophets there prophesying over him, are the only cases that and only signs that Mary really had that indicated that Jesus was the Messiah, that he was, really special and different than everybody else. But of course we don't know. But I do think that lesson from there, that we should pursue after God, that we should try and be in his house when we can and as much as we can. It is something that we should try and emulate in our lives and do so in our pursuit of God. So with that, I would like to invite you all to join us for our last worship song today.